Hello and welcome to a presentation about the pagan religion that stemmed from the area of Scandinavia 1,000 to thousands of years ago and how that turned into some religions today. I'm going to talk about the semi-phenomenological idea behind this religion because it was mainly passed down through oral tradition and wasn't written down until the Vikingers and the British started fighting during the Viking Age, during the 5th and 8th century. Only a 300 period where Vikingers were actually imprinted on the historical timeline of humankind. There's a lot of history we have lost and a lot of things we can assume about the people of Scandinavia that birthed this religion of Norse mythology and Asa true today. What we do know about the civilizations in Scandinavia prior to the Viking or raids and the history of their famous excavations, we do know that they were an agricultural egalitarian society for many years, and it turned into a more stratified civilization when chieftains and little chiefdoms all over Scandinavia were sprouted about, and that was their power situation. And those chieftains, their leader of their clan, Viking or leader, was kind of the power source, the heart, the respect of that whole community that farmed and worked for that chief in order for their protection and community to be upheld. But not in any similar way that we think of the power structures that we have in this modern society. It was very different. The communities looked at their chief leader as a priest-like role that almost was similar to the role of Ogden, the main mythical god of the Norse mythology. And this person would bring back the riches and would bring back what they owed to their community as chief leader. Everyone worked for each other. This was a big community that believed in the same thing, and they were very connected to the land, seeing that their life was all about working off of the land. And when I talk about the group of they, as in working for their chief leader and working for the community around them, there's this supposed theory from the podcast I listened to, like during this time and the years before it, I think for many years, across the land of Scandinavia, there was a common language that was spoken, and that's the idea, and that they all lived in a similar way across a huge amount of land, which is a phenomenon in itself, and there's not a lot of facts to back this up, but to think there was this big collection of humans in the Scandinavian land, and throughout history, Rome started trading with them, China started trading with them during the Iron and the Bronze Ages, and they started being influenced by other cultures around them, where Christianity swept through. And despite Christianity lurking its way into Northern Europe, that was seemingly untouched for so long by other cultures, despite all this, despite them being influenced, the Old Norse culture had stayed so intact with one another and continued to be very loyal to their sense of livelihood, what we call Old Norse, and their mythology and all their systems of beliefs. When they started meeting the rest of the world, they hung on to what they believed in, and that's why I think this culture is so powerful, and the primary reason I studied it for this presentation. And I can hear my own bias in that, but I want to reveal something I read on some of the comments on about the rise from Old Norse to Christianity and what the people had to say about that today.
There's this article, clearly not an academic source, called Viking Religion from the Norse Gods to Christianity by David Nickel, and was written in 2019. Great info about how ambiguous the history we have about all of the culture from Old Norse and how it came about today. The comment section struck me the most, and I'd like to read some of them. You won't find real evidence of anything on the internet. Hence, Norse predated Christ. It's best you drop your thoughts on Norse. You don't understand us. We never were called Vikings, but Vikingers. Why else would the Devil's Bible, King's Book, be about us? Our Germanic past predating all sorts of religion on earth. Accrediting to the oral traditions and the stuff we don't know. And then someone named Raven posted this. My Norse brother. We were called various peoples before we were Norse. The length of time we were in Scandinavia pales in comparison to the centuries spent as Scythians, let alone when we were Ostrogoths Goths. Spiritual beliefs did in fact change with the language, although our ideas about the gods did carry throughout our generations. We were always the fiercest warriors. Christianity did not change that. In fact, Christianity brought us together once again as people in Europe, as were once in Scythia and or Palestine. Our complacency and lack of keeping our people separate is ruining us. And I think that's an important point because, of course, culture is vast, culture is different across every landscape, and for the resources I did study via academic sources to say that these people were one people speaking the same Old Norse language is debunked. And all the research I've done has just been fascinating to hear all the opinions about it. The last comment from this article ties into how the pre-era of when Christianity influenced Northern Europe was a time of incredible loyalty to their own heritage and culture as a Northern European community, and how that still lives on today because of the history provided that tried to take it away from them, like so many other cultures. But this comment by Daniel, the gods are alive and very well around the world, though, and they're stronger today than they were in the last 1,000 years. Forced Christianization failed, after all. Hail the Iser. From that source, that non-academic source about what I got to research via this subject, I realize is so discredited as well, and I'm kind of thinking black and white that most all the things I read about this religion and historical context of it was discredited because we know so little, but from the facts that we do know about the basics of the mythology is going to be in our next video with Jordan, who will explain that and how it's seen today in Iceland specifically, of them practicing asatru.
Okay, so what did Norse pagans believe in? Well, they were a polytheistic society. So they basically believed in a bunch of gods and goddesses working together. But it's actually more than that. They actually believed in the entire universe being connected to a giant tree called Yggdrasil. And it has different realms. So the realm that we inhabit is called Midgard. That's where all the humans are. And then there's another realm called Asgard. That's where all the gods and goddesses are. And there's a couple other realms that are home to giants, dwarves, elves, and other, like, I guess, we would call supernatural creatures. But back to how the Norse gods are set up. They were basically, the story is that there were two branches, or two like pantheons. There's Aesir, which is the like, these gods are more of like our social concepts. So there's like gods like Odin, father of all the gods, Thor, god of thunder, lightning, Balder, and then there's the other pantheon, which is Vanir, and this represents more fertility, sexuality in the future. These gods would be Freya, and Joran and Freyr, and then those are the two like pantheons of the gods and goddesses. But as I was talking about, there are other realms for these supernatural beings. So for the giants, they would be in their realm is called Jotun, or well, they're called Jotun. But yeah, and the story is basically these two groups, Aesir and Vanir, used to be at war with each other until they merged into one unified group of supernatural beings. And they kind of rule over Yggdrasil together. And what's really interesting about like their view of the gods is that they all have like very human characteristics. Like they argue, they have flawed personalities, they make mistakes, which is like, it's interesting because in other religions, like, like they also like seem to have flawed personalities, but they're never viewed as a mistake. It's more like divine judgment. Whereas like here, it's like, oh yeah, that was silly. I don't know. It's just a very unique view compared to other religions. Anyways, so other facts about Norse paganism is they have an animistic view, meaning that they believe all living things and phenomena have a spiritual presence or essence, and like the reason why it's like kind of hard to research this topic is because the only holy texts they have for Norse paganism are from pre-Christian Scandinavia, and they're rune stones, so they're like actual stones, and which is just like, I don't know, it's crazy that we like know anything about it at all just from that alone. But yeah, they have no Bible, no list of commandments. It's been like I guess like they're sort of like foreign commandments. It's like been like decentralized, so it's like more open to interpretation. So it's just like kind of like be a good person. And they do have a concept of the afterlife, but it's really like unique. So basically, half of practicing Norse pagans killed in combat. So only like if like 100, Vikings die, only 50 of them are destined to get to go to Valhalla and meet Odin. And Valhalla is like, is basically the idea of it is like it's a giant meat hall where you just spar and like break bread and drink meat with a bunch of other fallen heroes throughout Viking history. Yeah, but this brings us up to modern Norse paganism. So that's like how a rundown of like, what it actually is, but like it's coming back. There's a modern version of it. And the modern Norse paganism is called heathenry. And it's got a couple like, it's got like, there's like 3 groups right now in Iceland that are kind of following it. There's the Isatru, the Vinatru, and the Rokatru. So the Isatru is like the one that like is the most prevalent and like actually has like a pretty good following. But basically, the Isatru means belief or faith in the ancient gods, It's Iceland's pre-Christian religion, and it was started in 1972. And all we could really find was like their values are fairness, tolerance, and acceptance. So as I was saying earlier, it's open interpretation. It's like very decentralized. Um, and then the other two modern ones, Vinatru, um, like it's almost like a monotheistic take on paganism, whereas like instead of focusing on all of the gods, like they still acknowledge they exist, but this focuses entirely on veneer. And then the last one was Rokatru, which is so earlier when I said there were like two pantheons of Norse gods, there's like a third one kind of, but no one talks about it because it's like the third pantheon is like the underworld, so it's like the darker side of Norse paganism. They're all like dealing with death and like darker topics. But yeah, Rokatsu is like known as the dark side. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Well, Jordan and I tried our best to explain the old religion of Norse paganism and what the Norse mythology really was back then. I think it just the sneak peek into not only the religion of what Northern Europeans once lived like back in the day, thousands of years ago, just to see a part of their livelihood as the farmers that they were, and to think that they're kind of a phenomenon of a human civilization that we know so little about, and to know about their realms of what they thought of world was, I think is pretty neat. And discredited or credited sources, Norse mythology is still resilient today as they were in the first centuries of humankind. Thanks for listening, and I hope this is a type of ode to the sea pirates of the Vikingers that they were.